Today, I'm joined by New York City Mayor Eric Adams, the Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, Robert Conti, the Commissioner of the New York Police Department, Commissioner Sewell, as well as Special Agent Charlie Patterson, who is the Director of the Washington Field Office for the ATF. We are in the John A. Wilson building in Washington, D.C., to call on the public's help to identify and locate a suspect in a disturbing series of violent attacks in Washington, D.C. and in New York City. We believe that there are at least 5 separate shootings linked to the same suspect. In all cases, the victims were men experiencing homelessness who were sleeping outside. Tragically, one person in D.C. died of his injuries, and at least one person in New York City has died. Both police departments have released photos of the suspect, and we are working urgently with our federal partners at the ATF to locate the individual and get him into police custody. We're calling on anyone who has any information to reach out to our tip lines. There is a lot of good detective work that has produced some good images. So we want residents to look at those images and call us. You may call us anonymously by calling 202-727-9099 or texting 50411. We know that this is a scary situation. We know that our unsheltered residents already face a lot of daily dangers, and it is unconscionable that anybody would target this vulnerable population. As we work to locate the subject, we're calling on all of our residents who are unsheltered, both in D.C. and New York City, to seek shelter. In Washington, anyone can request free transportation to a shelter by calling our shelter hotline at 202-399-7093 or calling 311. Our shelters have space, they are safe, and we welcome you to stay in a shelter while we work on permanent housing for you. Again, look carefully at these images. Call in tips so that we can get this individual off of the streets. Mayor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. And homelessness should not be a homicide. This was a cold-blooded attack. When you look at the premeditative action of this shooter, it sends a clear and loud message that we need the help from the public. The work and coordinated effort from the New York City Police Department, the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., and the ATF brought about a clear gathering of evidence, particularly the facial evidence that we have. Someone knows this person. We're asking for the public to find him. We don't want to lose another resident in this city, in New York, or anywhere else. This person is carrying out a premeditative act of shooting innocent people. The shooting in New York, he looked around, he made sure no one was there, and he intentionally took the life of an innocent person. He must be brought to justice. We will bring him to justice. And if he's watching, we're telling him to turn himself in. This is unacceptable. But it also highlights, as the mayor here in Washington, and as I've been stating, and the mayors we've met through the last few days, the overproliferation of guns in our cities is creating an encounter that's causing bloodshed across our nation. It is time to stop this fixation with guns. There are too many guns on our streets. And the partnership with the federal government and city governments, cooperations and collaborating together is going to rid us of the guns that are on our street, but we need to stop the flow of guns to our streets. Washington, D.C. is not manufacturing guns. New York City is not a gun manufacturing city, but the guns are ending up on our streets. It's time to end this.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert J. Conti III, Chief of Police here in Washington, D.C. I know that there are a lot of questions about what is going on and how do we know what we know. So I will attempt to share with you today as much as I can share with respect to the incidents that have occurred in Washington, D.C. beginning on March 3rd all the way through to March 9th. What we know is we have a depraved person that is targeting our unhoused residents. We know that. And we know that as a result of the actions that have occurred here in our nation's capital, as well as in our sister city in New York City. The attacks in Washington, D.C., as I stated, began on March the 3rd. The attack on March the 3rd in itself did not necessarily raise a flag of a pattern because it was the first incident to occur. And in that incident, an unhoused person was shot. And when that person was shot, that offense occurred in the 1100 block of New York Avenue. The person who was shot at that point was not exactly sure why he was shot, thought it might be related to the person trying to rob him, but nevertheless, that individual was shot. There were the two subsequent cases that occurred, the last case being the homicide that we experienced here in Washington, D.C. in the 400 block of New York Avenue. In that particular case, that individual, when we initially reported on this, that individual was suffering from thermal burns. His tent was on fire, and we learned only through autopsy that the individual was shot as well as stabbed. That person died as a result. That person's death was ruled a homicide. As we were going through this investigation, I must really acknowledge one of MPD's own, the captain of our homicide unit, Captain Kevin Kentish. Captain Kentish is a New York City native. He's a native of Queens, New York. And as Captain Kentish, his unit was responsible for investigating the homicide. He happened to be scrolling through his social media over the weekend where he saw an image of the New York City suspect that was put out to the public. It was during the review of that image that Captain Kentish took that image to his team, reviewed that image with his team, and as they reviewed it, based upon the description, based upon other evidence that we know with respect to this case, we're able to connect with our federal partners in the ATF and forensically link these cases together. That is significant with respect to what we are investigating. I am confident that we will find this individual, that we will bring this person to justice, and it will happen with great detective work. It will happen with scientific evidence that we have, and it will happen because of the help of the community. I am confident that this case will close. Every hour, we are receiving calls and more calls from residents, and I'm asking them to continue to call that information in. I feel the knot is tightening in on the person who's responsible for this murder here in Washington, D.C., as well as the murder in New York City. This most recent image that we put out is the suspect that we believe to be the person who's responsible for this. And I'm continuing to ask the public, if you have seen this person, if you know who this person is, please call us 202-727-9099 or text us anonymously at 50411. We really need to get this case closed before anyone else in our community, or in any community for that matter, is hurt or worse, murdered by this person. We don't know this person's mental health. We don't know if this person is homeless or not. We just honestly don't know a lot of things. But the things that we do know that link these cases together certainly suggest that this person has already murdered more than one time. And I think that that is significant enough to garner the attention of everyone who's watching this, whether it's on a national network or whether it's on a local network. We need to find this person. And I'm confident and hopeful that we will do that here in short order. Commissioner Sewell.
Good evening. I too share the chief's confidence that we will apprehend this individual and rather quickly, and it will take the community, it will take the extraordinary investigators, and it will take our partnerships with those agencies that have helped us along the way. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. Our presence here today demonstrates two important things: our sense of urgency and our sense of unity and purpose. I want to thank Metropolitan Police Chief Robert Conti and his team, and I want to thank our partners in the ATF. Special Agents in Charge Charlie Patterson here in Washington and John DeVito in the New York field office for helping us make these connections that link the DC and New York City shootings. The NYPD has devoted every available resource to this case. From the moment we learned the two shootings were linked, we launched a citywide effort to reach out to the homeless population and urge them with three goals: to warn them and seek shelter, to ask them if they had encountered this subject from the pictures we showed them, and to ensure that there were no undiscovered victims. By Sunday morning, once the New York and DC investigations were linked, our investigators began the seamless exchange of data, pictures, and other clues. Today, in cooperation with the Major City Chiefs Association, we brought together representatives from cities up and down the East Coast and across the country to share information, but to also determine if any similar cases fit this pattern. We're sharing information because we have a perpetrator who is mobile, who has struck in at least two major United States cities. We want and need them to know as much as we do. Those experiencing homelessness are suffering. They are people who face challenges every day just to survive. That is why we will use every tool, engage every bit of science, and work with every partner to end these shootings and murders and bring this individual to justice. We will do it swiftly, and we will do it with the help of our citizens, our communities, and our partners. Thank you.
Special Agent.
Thank you, Commissioner Sewell. My name is Charlie Patterson. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the ATF Washington Field Division. On behalf of ATF, I would like to offer our deepest condolences to the many families and friends affected by these horrific acts. ATF is working closely with the MPD and NYPD to identify and arrest the criminal responsible for these murders and assaults. Let me assure you that ATF and our partners here today will not rest until this shooter is brought to justice. ATF's role in this investigation mirrors our support to police departments and other local, state, and federal law enforcement partners across the country each and every day. We are committed to reducing violent crime in our communities through strategies driven by intelligence, technology, and proven science. Through these strategies, ATF develops timely, actionable investigative leads that help identify the trigger pullers who terrorize our communities and the traffickers who illegally supply them with guns. Every day, we share these leads and our dedicated law enforcement partners to maximize our collective efforts. Let me reiterate, our commitment to arresting the criminal responsible for these acts is unwavering. To that end, in addition to the investigation, ATF will offer $20,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the individual responsible for these assaults and murders that target some of the most vulnerable in our cities. Anyone with information can contact the ATF at 1-800-ATF-TIPS. That's 1-800-ATF-TIPS. Thank you.
Okay, that's $70,000 reward, and 25 in New York City, 25 in Washington, D.C., and 20,000 from the ATF. Please look closely at these images. Call us so that we can get this person off of the streets. On topic, Lindsay.
Do you have any sense on where he might live, whether it be New York or DC or somewhere else? I was also wondering if there's any vehicle that he's linked to, if you knew how he might be traveling.
Chief.
The short answer is no. We know that this individual obviously has the capacity to move between cities. So between here and New York, how he got there, uncertain of what his home residence, place of residence, we're unsure what that is. With respect to the vehicle, we're not aware, or we're not looking for at this point a specific vehicle. If there's information that the public has about a specific vehicle that might help us link to this particular individual, we will gladly accept that information and investigate that lead thoroughly.
I'm wondering if you can clarify, is there just one gun that you believe is being used in all these incidents? Have you linked that gun to any other crimes other than these 5 shootings? And can you tell us about any reach out to any other jurisdictions to see if maybe he has struck in other places other than New York and DC?
So one gun, it appears one gun linked to these cases. As Commissioner mentioned earlier, there was a major city chief's call, which MPD, NYPD are both participants in, as well as some of our other law enforcement partners up and down the East Coast. Through our partners at the ATF, there is technology and resources that we have whereby we are able to check ballistic information to see if there are links across the country. And so far, we have not discovered any other links other than the cases here in Washington, D.C. and New York.
Okay, Martin.
So the imagery you have here is a full frontal of the suspect, but how did you make the link between this person that we have in an image and the incident in D.C.? Is it just mere proximity on New York Avenue? Was there something else connecting this person to the actual crimes?
So, one of the things that the mayor certainly pushes here in Washington, D.C. is taking advantage of the closed-circuit TV program that we have here in the District of Columbia. People who want cameras can take advantage of the rebate program, and I think it's an excellent program. As a result of a ton of video and camera footage that we've been able to review, that is eventually what has led us to our suspect, in addition to other evidentiary things that we're not able to discuss at this point.
Shamari, News 4. Chief, if the suspect is watching this, what do you say to him?
Turn yourself in. Turn yourself in, and we're coming for you. That's the bottom line. Our reach is far and wide, and we're coming for you. This person has unnecessarily taken the lives of 2 innocent people. 2 innocent people, and that did not have to be, but we're coming for them.
And Chief, what tips and leads have you received thus far? I know we're preliminarily in this investigation, but people watching this want to know.
Well, I want people to continue calling in. People are calling in with information, and the information that people are calling in are helping us to get closer to closing this case. So I would encourage people to continue to call in.
Thank you.
Mark Morales with CNN. I know in certain cases like these, as soon as you get surveillance footage of the suspect, you start working backwards and tracing back further and further until you can trace where it was this person came in. So I wanted to know for anybody up there at the podium, has that happened at this point? Have we been able to dig deep enough to see how it was that this person was able to get into New York City from DC, how they traveled in, where else were they spotted, and what other locations, even up to where was this photo taken?
Yeah, that's all part of the investigation, and really not at liberty to disclose all that, but I will assure you that we will leave no stone unturned as we track through this individual's whereabouts during the shootings, prior to the shootings, after the shootings. All of that is part of the investigation.
Yes.
For Mayor Adams, your police commissioner mentioned that the homeless should be finding shelter right now. Is the city of New York still enforcing the order to remove homeless people from subways? Is that still being enforced, and do you think that might have contributed to the unsafe conditions for the homeless here?
Yes, we are still enforcing that. There's nothing dignified by living on the subway tracks. There's nothing dignified by treating homeless people in an undignified manner, by not giving them the services that they deserve. We have a right to shelter city. where if you need shelter, we will give you shelter. And to even insinuate that giving people the dignity of being in housing will contribute to some sick mind of shooting them is something I'm just not going to entertain.
Is shelter space still available for people right now?
I'm sorry?
Is shelter space available? Will people be able to find, will everyone be able to find shelter?
We're required by law to house any individual that wants shelter. We have a right to shelter in our city. We're required by law. Anyone that wants shelter will get shelter in the city of New York.
Thank you.
Eric?
Mayor Bowser, homicides are up in both of your cities. What do you say to people who look at this and just see it as more evidence that these cities might not be safe?
Well, as the mayor just mentioned, we're looking at a person who's clearly sick and is targeting, I shouldn't use the word sick, clearly depraved, and targeting people who are vulnerable. And we are going to use all of the resources that we have at our disposal. I think that the detective work and the cooperation that you've seen here should give people confidence that the police are using evidence. They're sharing that evidence with detectives. The fact that our MPD detectives were able to quickly link what they saw among our homeless residents, share that information with the ATF, and then connect it to New York City, so that relatively quickly we have a clear lookout for this person, tells us that our law enforcement officials are doing the job that we need them to do.
I have a question on the investigation too. You said this was at least 5 people shot. We're talking about, we think the first shooting was in early March. How confident are you, and maybe this is a question for the chief, but how confident are you that it's only these 5 people who've been shot by this person?
Chief.
Thank you. Based upon the evidence that we have now, the information that we have now, the information that we've got from the ATF, we feel confident about these individuals. But like there is a possibility that anything is possible. Certainly, if there's a person out there who has been shot and think that they may have been a victim of this this depraved person, by all means, please reach out to law enforcement. But we're fairly confident that these are the 5 cases that are linked.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. It's WTOP.
Yep.
So given the nexus of New York City and Washington and the location of the attacks here in Northeast DC along New York Avenue, are the rails getting additional surveillance or attention? Is there any thought to that? And also, could you say anything more about the way this individual has conducted himself? Mayor Adams seemed to indicate there was no verbal interchange, and Chief Conti. Was that the case with all the shootings? No talking, just shooting?
Yes, very much consistent with what our partners in New York experience. Yes.
Yes.
Evan Lambert with News Nation. That photo there in the middle, it appears to be an ATM photo. Are you using an ATM card to potentially track him? And is there any indication of where he might be right now, or where was he in that photo? And also, have you ruled out the 6th incident in New York City as potentially being connected?
So with respect to the photo, we don't want to talk right now about where exactly the photo came from. Certainly, it is a pretty good image that we think people will be able to recognize this individual. So what we want to focus on is people calling in, if they recognize that individual, and as the case unfolds from there, we'll be able to really kind of talk more publicly about those things. So we don't want so that we don't adversely impact our case.
And then for both mayors, could I also ask? Oh yeah. Go ahead.
I don't. As far as Jimmy Essig, Chief of Detectives, New York City. As far as the 6th incident you talk about in New York City, we've ruled that out. It was in close proximity to the 2 shootings that we had, but he succumbed to other medical conditions.
And for both mayors, you both have been recently criticized for criminalizing homelessness. And I just wonder what is being done to give people permanent housing beyond encouraging them to go to a shelter.
You heard the mayor say that he's a right to shelter city. We are a right to shelter city as well. And we're very proud of the very intense homeless services that we offer in DC that are robust. And we can say with certainty that everybody is seeking shelter, can have shelter in Washington, DC. You are familiar with our Encampment pilot program called the CARE Pilot Program that we have been operating for months. We're looking at encampments across the district. We think we have a couple dozen, and the conditions at some of them are horrible. Okay? People living with rats, people in unsafe conditions, people who are already scared for their lives in those encampments. And we know that we can offer people permanent housing, and we can offer them shelter. And that is what our homeless encampment situation is. We know that we can get people in shelter. And when they get in shelter, they are succeeding. They're dealing with the issues that led them to tent encampments, and they are succeeding. So that is our focus. We will continue the very successful pilot programs that we've started in the district, and we're going down a list. Our approach is to go out with teams of outreach workers to make sure our residents know all of the programs and services that are available to them. Some people, they already have access to housing, and we need to get them connected to housing and get them off the street. Mayor?
Yes. The loudest is not the majority. The people of the city of New York strongly believe there's nothing dignified by allowing people to sleep in subway tracks, allowing people to sleep on platforms, allowing people not to have the wraparound services that they need. So those who are the loudest, they do not speak on behalf of the overwhelming New Yorkers. I ran on a very strong platform that we're not going to treat people in an undignified manner by having them sleep without the services they need. I was elected to be the mayor because of that. And so because someone is loud and they have a Twitter account, they do not speak for the people of New York City. We are not going to allow the residents of our city to be in a position where they can't take care of themselves or they're dangerous to others. We had several cases in our subway system where individuals could not take care of themselves. They assaulted people, pushed people to the subway tracks, and endangered New Yorkers. That is not going to happen in New York City.
All right, I have a couple who have asked here tonight, and young lady in the house, and then Muriel will come around to you in a second.
Thank you.
Heather Kraft with ABC7. This question is for Mayor Bowser or Chief Conte. You said you're encouraging people to seek shelter, but we also know there are many people experiencing homelessness who will never go into a shelter. It's something they don't feel comfortable with. Can you talk about what steps you're taking to protect those people who will continue to sleep on the streets because they don't go into a shelter?
Well, the chief is going to deploy like he always deploys, and our officers are going to engage with people on the street, but more importantly, our homeless outreach workers, our human services workers are going to engage with people on the streets. We think that there will be some that we have to continue to work with to get to accept shelter, but that's exactly what we're going to do. And Janae?
Yeah, Janae with Actors. Can someone clarify, is it 70,000 or 75,000 or?
25, 25, 20,
Okay.
70.
And is the new photo from, do we know when it's from? Can you share?
What day?
Yeah, where it's from also?
We cannot. The chief already addressed that. Yes, behind you.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, where is it? When is it from?
Well, do we know when
Can
it
you
was
say that?
taken? Can you address that, chief?
It was recent, I'll tell you that much.
Beatrice Peterson from ABC News. I'm wondering what has been done to prevent future attacks, and how are the other victims that have been attacked are doing?
As the mayor already mentioned, we're working with our partners in the health department and our officers who we have assigned to do homeless outreach, to get the word out, this image out, all those things, making sure that we're checking where folks are living in our city. We know what a lot of those spaces are. We just want to make sure that people are safe and that they have the information and access to the information, that they have access to the resources at the Department of Health. So that's the Metropolitan Police Department working very closely with our partners on the health side of things to make sure that we cover down on all angles. That's very important to us that we get that done.
All right, Deborah, does Arlington want to address the outreach?
Hello, outreach teams were out today. They're amplifying the information that our police departments put out. They were showing photos similar to the message from New York City, letting people know that that danger is out there, letting people know that safety is available to them and how to access it, and also asking them if they have any information, helping them make sure that we are connecting them so that they can report that information. So we're working really hard to make sure people can access safety. We're hearing from our outreach workers that folks are scared. Some people are planning on coming in, even folks who may not normally come in, and we are really glad to hear that. We are ready to welcome them.
Okay, yes.
How are the victims doing?
Victims.
Yeah, the victims, the ones who have the non-life-threatening injuries, they are recovering. That's all I will say because they're witnesses at this point.
Okay, hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
You say that these have been premeditated, and is there a pattern to the victims? Are they alone? Is there a certain gender? Is there a certain race? What kind of pattern is there?
The pattern is the primary male homeless. That's really the pattern, and it's in the early morning hours is what we've seen so far.
They've been sleeping alone. Are they alone, or are they with other groups around?
In most instances, they've been alone. In most instances.
The man killed, have you identified him or spoken to family or friends?
I'm sorry, say again?
The man who was killed here, have you spoken to his family or friends, or has he been identified?
I have not spoken to family.
We know who he is.
Ma'am? I'm sorry, I can't hear your question. Yeah, I think, have we identified the guy in the tent? Yeah, we've identified the guy in the tent, right.
We'll get you.
Yeah, we'll get you his information.
Okay, last couple of questions. Shamari, 1, 2. Okay.
A question for Chief Conti.
Yep.
As you well know, we've been in communities with different murders and homicides that there are people who have information and they're reluctant to come forward. Number one, because of the no snitch rule, but number two, because they're scared. What can you or the police in New York City do to ensure that the person who provides a tip, if it's not anonymously, will be safe and they're going to be okay regarding this investigation?
Well, we will do like we always do, and I will say this, Shamar, that people are cooperating. People are calling in tips to the Metropolitan Police Department, and they have been. Many of the cases that we have been able to bring to closure, and even some of those that will close very soon, are the result of residents calling law enforcement, giving us those little pieces of information that we need. They have the assurance of the Metropolitan Police Department that we will do everything that we possibly can to make sure that people feel comfortable and safe when they call in tip information. Added to that, again, there's a significant reward attached to this, a $70,000 reward. I want to amplify that because sometimes, for some people, financial incentives can be a motivating factor for people to call in information. And again, we're asking anyone who knows this individual, I mean, if you see this photograph, this is pretty clear. Right? Unless this person's been living in a bubble and nobody knows this individual, somebody out there knows them. And we're just asking that that person call that information in. Thank you.
For Commissioner Sewell or Chief Essig or even Chief Conti, have you folks had investigators spoken to the surviving victims? Have they been interviewed? Have they given any information or any possible leads? And a follow-up question, is there anything that you can say about the ballistics that were done, about the weapon? Is there anything unique about the gun or the bullet or anything like that?
So we are interviewing the witnesses that were available. We certainly won't be able to get into the details as it stands now because it's an open investigation, but we are amplifying those investigations and interviews with those witnesses.
How much time was saved by your detective seeing this post on social media and doing something?
What's your question?
How much time was saved by the detective noticing this on social media? That's pretty astounding.
Yeah, I don't think you can really quantify it, to be honest with you. It helped out tremendously. I can tell you that without talking about how the system actually works. I mean, it could have been a very long time. It could have been months before we actually were able to make the connection. So, Captain Kentish over there. Great job, sir. Thank you.
What is the firearm that was used?
Just from a New York aspect, the speed and cooperation was incredible. We become aware of our homicide victim at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. We have a press conference and put out media at about 9:30, 10 o'clock Saturday night. By early next morning, the Metro PD is in contact with us. So it really gave our investigation a really good jump stop with these pictures, and the exchange of information and cooperation between the three agencies up here, ATF, Metro, NYPD, has been phenomenal.
With the Washington Post. I just wanted to follow up on ballistics. Have you directly linked ballistic evidence from one shooting in New York to one shooting in DC?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to ask Bryce to please hold.